He was an atheist for 47 years, not casually, not emotionally, convincingly, rationally. The kind of person who trusted what could be measured, tested, repeated, explained. The kind of person who did not hate religion, but simply saw no reason to need it, no reason to believe in God, heaven, angels, judgment, or the survival of consciousness after death. Then he died for 4 minutes. And when he came back, he had no explanation. That is what makes this question so unsettling. Not that believers describe something beyond death that fits the story people expect, but when someone who never believed in God, heaven, or the soul reaches the edge of death and returns speaking about light, presence, peace, or a reality that felt more real than ordinary life, the entire conversation changes. It is because now the mystery is no longer happening inside faith. It is breaking into skepticism itself, and that creates a curiosity gap almost impossible to ignore. If a person expected nothing, why do they come back describing something? And why do they often describe it with the same careful hesitation as people who spent their lives believing? Atheists do not believe in God, or heaven, or the soul in the traditional religious sense. They tend to trust physics, chemistry, neurons, biology, and the material processes that can be studied from the outside. For many of them, consciousness is what the brain does. When the brain stops, the self stops with it. No afterlife, no celestial judgment, no eternal reunion, no divine light waiting at the end of the tunnel. That worldview is not childish or empty. It is often built from discipline, doubt, observation, disappointment, philosophy, and a refusal to accept comforting answers without evidence. Many atheists are not rebelling against mystery. They are resisting explanations they consider too easy. They prefer uncertainty to false certainty, evidence to reassurance, and intellectual honesty to hope purchased too cheaply. Which is why near-death experiences become so disruptive in this context. Because the more rationally committed a person is to material explanations, the more destabilizing it becomes when their own experience seems to exceed the framework they spent a lifetime trusting. It is one thing to doubt religion from a distance. It is another to survive something that refuses to stay inside your own worldview. But some of them have experienced something that does not fit into any equation they know. So that is the disturbing part. Not because the experience automatically proves religion, but because it breaks the expected pattern. A person who anticipated darkness describes light. A person who dismissed spiritual language returns using words like presence, peace, clarity, or even love that felt larger than the body. Some say they left the room. Some say they watched their own resuscitation from above. Some describe a realm that felt more real than waking life, more coherent than dream, more vivid than memory. Others speak less dramatically, but with the same quiet conviction that something happened, which cannot be reduced, at least for them, to a simple malfunction. The problem is not only what they saw, it is that they often return unable to reduce it to brain failure without feeling intellectually dishonest. They do not always become believers, but they stop talking about death as if it were simple. And simplicity was often the thing they trusted most. That is why these stories spread so easily. They disturb both camps at once. Maybe the brain is creative when it is dying. Hell smiles because this is still the strongest skeptical answer. A brain under extreme stress can distort time, intensify emotion, generate visions, fragment identity, and build immersive experiences out of chemistry and collapse. Maybe it creates exactly what a person needs in that final moment, not because heaven is real, but because the mind cannot bear its own extinction without one last act of meaning. In that view, the light is neurological, the presence is interpretive, the peace is chemical, a beautiful hallucination before the silence, and there is logic in that. Why dying brains are not ordinary brains. They are unstable, pressured, deprived, and potentially capable of extraordinary internal events. Hell's interpretation remains powerful, because it keeps the mystery inside matter. It explains transcendence without requiring transcendence to be true. It gives science the last word without making the experience meaningless. But even this explanation has cracks. Hallucinations are usually fragmented, unstable, personal, and chaotic. Near-death reports often sound structured, emotionally coherent, and strangely consistent across people who do not share the same beliefs. That does not disprove the skeptical view, but it keeps the argument open. Or maybe the experience is not built by the brain. Maybe it is finally received by it. Heaven enters here with a quieter but more radical possibility. What if the brain is not the source of consciousness in the way we assume? What if it is less like a generator and more like an interface, a receiver, a filter, an instrument through which awareness is expressed during life? If that were true, then the weakening of the brain near death would not necessarily extinguish consciousness. It might release it from its ordinary constraints. The experience near death would then look different, not because the brain is inventing fantasy, but because the mind is encountering reality without the same limitations it had while embodied. This idea is harder to test, which is why skeptics resist it. But it remains haunting because it explains why some people describe the moment of dying as clearer, not more confused, not dimmer but sharper, not fragmented but more whole. If consciousness is filtered during life rather than created from nothing, then the edge of death may feel less like shutdown and more like unveiling. And that possibility is exactly what makes the topic impossible to dismiss completely. Researchers at the University of Virginia have been studying these experiences for decades. That matters because this is not only folklore or internet testimony. It is a subject that has attracted long-term attention precisely because the pattern keeps refusing to disappear. Across cultures, across beliefs, across people who had no reason to see the same thing. The reports vary in language and interpretation, but certain motifs return with remarkable consistency. Leaving the body, heightened clarity, peace, encounters with beings or presences, movement through darkness or light, and a sense that ordinary life looks different afterward. Even more interesting is that people do not always describe what they expected to see. Religious identity does not perfectly predict the content of the experience. Skeptics sometimes report transcendence. Believers sometimes report confusion. That inconsistency makes the subject harder, not easier, because it resists simple confirmation bias. None of that forces a single conclusion. Consistent patterns do not automatically prove metaphysics, but they do make dismissal harder. Because when similar experiences appear in people with different religions, different expectations, and sometimes no spiritual expectation at all, the question becomes larger than doctrine. It becomes a problem for certainty itself. The atheist does not always stop being an atheist after a near-death experience, but they stop being certain. And that shift may be the most important part. These experiences do not always create conversion. Sometimes they create humility instead. A person may return still unconvinced by religion, still suspicious of doctrine, still reluctant to name what happened in theological language. But the clean material certainty is gone. The old confidence that death is simply the end becomes harder to hold with the same force. That is the tension at the heart of this topic. Near-death experiences do not automatically turn skeptics into believers. They do something more subtle and, in some ways, more powerful. They fracture certainty without replacing it with easy dogma. The person returns caught between science and mystery, still rational, or still questioning, but unable to speak about death as though it were merely solved. In some ways, that may be the most honest transformation of all. Not the abandonment of reason, but the collapse of arrogance. Not an answer, but a wound opened in certainty that never fully closes again. The most honest thing a person can say about what happens when we die is this: I do not know, but something happens, and it changes everything. That may be the deepest takeaway from all of this. Not proof, not doctrine, not certainty purchased at the cost of honesty. Just the recognition that the edge of death may be stranger than both believers and skeptics often prefer. A neutral face looking directly into the camera becomes the right final image because this question belongs to everyone. The faithful, the doubtful, the broken, the scientific, the dying, the ones who came back. Perhaps the most unsettling part is not that atheists report near-death experiences. It is that those experiences often sound less like fantasy and more like contact with a reality too large to fit cleanly into either religion or reductionism. And once a person has touched that possibility, even for 4 minutes, the world does not look quite the same again. Maybe that is why these stories spread so powerfully, because they do not give certainty to believers or defeat to skeptics. They place both in the same uncomfortable space, where the only honest response is wonder mixed with doubt. See you in the next video, where the questions only get darker.